Welcome to Unit 1's discussion on secondary classroom management. My name is Martin Dunlap, and I'll be your instructor for this online course for this semester. Our objectives to begin the course are: what are the essential questions that we need to think about as classroom managers, and how will I know if I am ready? Where do you see yourself 4 years from now? 5 of you will be out of teaching, probably all the men. This is what the statistics tell us. The teacher profile for today is 73% of the teachers in the classroom are women and 88% of them are white. So if you fit into that category, then you will be a part of what has been a trend in education for many years. There are 3 essential questions that I want to begin this course with. And those of you who will be involved in professional learning communities or have already been around professional learning communities know these 3 questions because they're critical to effective classroom instruction, and they're also critical to effective classroom management. The first question is, what do we want students to learn? And this is the first question you need to ask when you start designing a course, when you start designing your curriculum. Of course, today when you go into the classroom, the curriculum is already prescribed pretty much, and you know what it is. But you ask yourself, what is it that our students need to know? How do you determine that? Usually it's determined by the curriculum. What does that entail? It entails some research. It entails knowing the level of your learner and those are learning styles. How are the different ways that you can prepare things for them so that they can learn well? And then what is the content? What are the things that are essential for students to know when they finish your course? And is it all about your subject matter? Some people think all it's concerned about is teaching the science, but there are other things involved: research skills, effective behavior, interpersonal relationships, getting along with others, school rules, how to react and act in groups and with others. So there are more than that, but these are all things we want our students to learn. The second essential question is, how do we know they learned it? So this has to do with assessing. What kinds of assessments will you use? How will they be used? How often will they use? Are they graded or not? And really, assessments are broken down into 2 categories. They're summative and formative. And each of those categories can be actually divided into several different pieces. You can have formal assessments. You can have informal assessments. You can have, formal assessments that are graded. Formal assessments are just checking for understanding, just a way for you to see if students are learning. So you need to know how it is you're going to assess your students. The more often you can assess, the better chance you have of your students learning. And this doesn't mean paper and pencil tests. It doesn't necessarily mean that they have to answer all the multiple guess questions, but it means that you can check for understanding. In many classrooms today, when I visit student teachers, they will have chalkboards, or now they're dry eraser boards, or sometimes they just have thumbs up, thumbs down. Sometimes they all hold up the number of fingers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and whether they agree or disagree. There's all kinds of ways to check for understanding. These are all the assessments. These are how I know they've learned. And oftentimes I will visit a student teacher, watch them present a great lesson, and after it's over, I will ask them, how do you know the students learned this lesson? And oftentimes when you first start doing student teaching, you're so worried about your presentation, you're so worried about getting your plans done, you're so worried about all these little things, you don't really know whether they learned it or not. And so when you design, you've got to build in ways for the student to check and make sure the students are learning and that you're aware that they are learning or are not learning. The third essential question: what will you do if they do not learn? And this is really critical in your classroom management. Not that the other 2 aren't, because if you design great lessons and plan well, that takes care of a lot of classroom management issues. If you have great assessments that are engaging, that keep the kids moving forward, keep the pace of the class going, that helps your classroom management. But what do you do if they do not learn? What if it turns out that you've taught something, you've assessed it, and they haven't learned it? That may create management issues for you. Or it may be that they are not with you, you don't have them engaged, which is already a management problem. Or there may be disruptive behavior in the environment in which you are working, and that also will hinder their learning. So what will you do? Will you just create more homework? Will you do retesting? Will you reteach? Do you have an intervention system in your mind on how you're going to help these students learn? Now, if none of the class learns or the test turns out that everybody doesn't do well, then you got a problem. You're going to have to go back and reteach. But if it turns out that only a few people didn't get it, or some didn't get it at all, but others did, that's where you need to have interventions and other systems to get in place. So how do you break the class down? How do you work on that? All of those particular techniques or strategies that you may use to help the rest of the students learn are going to involve some form of effective classroom management to be able to manage groups at different levels or students at different levels and yet keep them all moving forward. So these three questions are critical when you're beginning your teaching career. Now let's talk about other questions that have to do with an effective classroom. What is a highly effective classroom environment? If you ask yourself, if I go visit a classroom and I think this is a really nice classroom, if the kids are engaged, they're learning, what is happening there? Is it active? Is it passive? Are there other things going on? Active classroom means the students are really working, they're really doing what they need to do. Passive would mean basically the teacher's presenting everything to them and they're just sitting there taking it in. In your mind, what makes it a more highly effective classroom? Learning is caught more than it's taught. And so you may want to think about what you would do to make your classroom more effective. Or when you observe a teacher and you say, boy, this class is just going well. What is going on that you can put your finger on to determine it's effective? How about, how do I create an effective classroom? How do I maintain it? There are two things you got to worry about. You got to worry about the instructional side, and you have to worry about the managerial side. So on the instructional side, you have to make sure you plan well, you have good content, you have enough things to do, you have some group activities, you have some pairing and sharing, or any particular strategy that you think you can incorporate that will engage students in the learning process and keep them moving forward and keep the pace of the class going. The next part attached to that, and they're very closely related, is managerial. How do I manage transitions from one activity to another, or from one course to another if I'm in the elementary? Or how do I manage going into group work and coming out in individual work? And how do I manage students going to the board? Or all of those particular things depending on what your design is for your lesson. So how do I create a highly effective classroom and maintain it? That's managerial. First of all, I have good instruction. I got good plans. I know what I'm doing. Second of all, I know how to manage it and I know how to get the students and keep them moving forward. Here are some characteristics of highly effective teachers. First of all, they have high expectations for student success. I want my kids to score well. I want them to do well. I want them to learn, and I want them to learn at a high level. They are extremely good at classroom management. That means they have a sense of with-itness, is what Robert Marzano calls it. I have a sense of knowing that kids are with me or not with me. I can anticipate when things are not going well. I can anticipate the particular student that it looks like he's going to go in a different direction, and I can correct that quickly. Or I also have a plan in place. If this doesn't work, this is how I'm going to go to make it work. So a highly effective teacher has good classroom management. And then they know how to teach a lesson for achievement. I'm not just presenting it because I have good techniques. I know how to run my PowerPoint. My PowerPoint dances all over the screen. I have great color. I have great videos that I'm playing. But when all of that is done, have I moved my students forward and have they achieved? So it's really important that you have all three of those characteristics. You have high expectations, you know how to manage the classroom, and then you know there's achievement going on in your classroom. What do I need to know to create a highly effective classroom? You have to plan well. There's no substitute for planning. I often hear student teachers say after the first couple of weeks out in the field, boy, I didn't realize how much time I had to spend planning to be ready to go every day. There are things that happen that you don't expect. And things don't always go like you thought they would go. And so planning is critical to understand what it is you want to teach, how you want to teach it, how you know they're going to learn it, and then what happens if it doesn't work, what's my next plan of action. You also have to know how to manage policies and procedures. I have observed student teachers when a fire bell has rung and they didn't know what to do, and they had to rely on their cooperating teacher or their mentor. Now, you need to know these procedures. Whenever you're in a building and you're in charge of teaching the classroom, you're not only in charge of the instruction and the assessment, what's going on in the room, but what happens in the building. If there's a tornado drill, there's a fire drill, how do you line them up to go to the lunchroom? What's the policy for leaving the room? You need to understand all of those particular things. If you want to have a highly effective classroom, you need to understand the policies and procedures and how you're going to do them. You need to have a bag of tricks, or your toolbox, as I often call it. What are your teaching strategies? Do you only know how to one way to present a lesson and one way to check for kids? Or do you have 5 or 6 or 7 different ways that you can teach and some strategies that you can use to help kids learn? Then this is real critical, developing good personal relationships. Highly effective teachers really know how to get to know their kids and build a relationship with their kids. I'm always thrilled and excited when I go watch a student teacher and I observe the kids wanting to come up and hug their leg or want to come up and high-five them, or they're talking to them about their games at the high school level or what they did over the weekend, and their teacher and student are having a relationship that is professional, yet there's an interest in the student and what the student knows, and you care about them as an individual. That will save you tons of time and effort on the teaching end because the students then have confidence in you as a person. What is your content? You have to know your content. If you're a science teacher, math teacher, history teacher, elementary teacher, you have lots of content. You need to know the content. There's nothing worse than trying to teach something that you don't completely understand. And so whatever it takes to do to study to learn that while you're here, and when you get out there and find out that there are concepts being taught that you haven't quite had yet, especially at the elementary level when you have to teach so many different subjects, it's really important that you understand the concepts that you're teaching. Then what is your style? What kind of a manager are you? What kind of a teacher are you? Do you know what your management and teaching style are? In the next week or so, we're going to take a management style inventory and give you a chance to see what your management style is and how you feel and think philosophically. And that will also help you determine what kind of management techniques you want to use. Now, I want you to take a few minutes after this discussion, go to the forums that are there, and take some time to answer the forums as thoughtfully and as reflectively as you can for this week. Welcome to the course again, and I hope you have a great semester over these next few weeks.